Welcome back to the Beehive, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today is going to be a really special show, so you might want to stick around the whole time because it'll be really good. And today we're going to talk about the very first United States Speedway champion ever in the history in 1925. Also, he was the first unofficial world champion. 1931. This guy was an amazing rider. He was gifted. He was the first Glamour Boy of Speedway. He was a hot rider. This guy was unbelievable. And who was he? He was Sprouts Elder. Sprouts' real name is James Lloyd Elder, and he was born August 4th, 1904. in the beautiful town of Fresno, California. Do you know Fresno, California? Yeah, it's it's just north of Bakersfield. Do you know Bakersfield? In Bakersfield and San Francisco. As a young boy, Sprouts worked in the horse industry. He was wanting to be a jockey on horses. He was grooming the horses, and he was really into horses. He would have been a good horse racer, by the way. But there was one problem with Sprouts. James Lloyd, let's call him James Lloyd. He was growing very tall. He just kept growing and growing. And as you know, the jockeys are small and little. And James Lloyd was very tall, and he was getting too tall. And they started calling him Sprouts because he was sprouting. He was growing over 6 feet tall, and he finished at 6 feet 3 or higher. James got out of the horse industry, the horse racing, and he went to work for a motorcycle shop. And he started racing motorcycles. He was actually one of the board track racers in the early 1920s. He started racing board track. He started hauling butt. He went from horse racing to motorcycle racing. If you follow the early day racing, they went ahead and they gave people nicknames according to, like, if they were small, if they were tall, if they were ugly. I mean, whatever. They would give you a nickname depending on who you are or what you look like or anything. And they went ahead and called Sprouts because he was tall. And he looked kind of funny on a motorcycle. One guy said he looked like a centipede on a motorcycle. He was big, tall, lanky, and he's on a little motorcycle. However, his height didn't deter him at all. James Lloyd became the first American Speedway champion ever. 1925. He won the first United States Speedway Championship. In the AMA, they said that he was an AMA champion. So he was the first United States Speedway champion. Mr. Elder won his championship, his first United States Speedway champion, at the tender age of 21. And that was in 1925. 2 years later, in 1927, he went over to the land down under. Do you go to the land down under? Women blow and men thunder. That's what happened to James. He went ahead and thundered down there in the land down under. He went ahead and was the United States national champion, and he was the Australian 1927 champion. James Lloyd Elder was an unbelievable rider. He went down to the land under in those long tracks. He went ahead and he won the championship that year. He was a good rider. That guy was spectacular. People were saying he was handsome. He was fast. He went ahead and knew how to race, so the races were exciting. He was talented. And James Lloyd Elder was unbelievable. Tom Snyder, he went ahead and wrote this in a book called Thrilling the Million. This was about Elder. Here we go. Elder was a wonderful showman and a most picturesque rider you've ever seen. He seemed to have a sense of what the crowd wanted, a close race, plenty of thrills. He saw what they got. He went ahead and thrilled that crowd. He would make a race with a horse donkey. Yeah, and as the saying goes, it just got himself home by a half a wheel length. James Elder would win by a half a wheel length, and he made the crowd go crazy. The problem for the Australian riders is that Elder was getting all the attention. The fans just loved Sprouts Elder. And then he was racing guys like Paddy Dean. Sprouts was beating all the local riders like Jack Bishop and Harry Bachman, Noel Johnson, Buzz Helbred, Frank Pierce, Dickie Smythe. Sprouts was just beating these guys. He was just going over there and beating those guys up. It was just crazy. This young, lanky, tall guy from Fresno went ahead and started blowing all the stars away in Australia. That's not fair. That was the same year in 27 that Harry Westlake from Exeter, England, was over there from Wax Carburetors in Australia, and he noticed all these speedway racers, and he said, you know, you need to come to England and race. We know that Australia started Speedway in 1923, and Harry Westlake wanted those riders to race over in Britain, so he recruited all these guys and Sprouts Elder, and they all went over to England. They had all these good racers in Australia, but when Sprouts Elder came, he was very handsome. He was tall, he was gorgeous, and the girls went crazy for Sprouts Elder. He was the first glamour boy of Speedway, Sprouts Elder. The girls just loved him. And the fans loved him too. Why? Because he was a good rider. He made the exciting shows. He was an unbelievable talent. He was just gifted. I mean, Sprouts Elder isn't really talked about much, but from what people say, the history, the reading, Sprouts Elder was one of the greatest American speedway riders ever. And that includes today too, all these great riders we have in this modern era. Sprouts Elder was just a gift from God. And Greg Hazrat, one of the early Speedway riders, was telling me this morning that he has some friends or relatives that actually got to watch him ride and said that he was the most exciting, picturesque, unbelievable rider ever. Woo! So Greg Hazrat was one of the true good riders of the early days, and he was telling me that Sprouts Elder had just an unbelievable name and was one of the greatest riders in the history of American Speedway. In Australia, in Marlborough, can you say that word? Marlborough. At the Australian racetrack, he won the golden helmet 4 times. That was unbelievable. Nobody did that like that. And Sprouts Elder was just, his stock was at an all-time high. He raced at Sydney, Weymouth, Brisbane, and Perth tracks. They were long tracks. And if you've traveled to Australia, Terry Clanton can tell you, the tracks are far from each other. You have to go really far to get to each race. And Sprouts Elder was racing all those tracks, and he was dominating. There was a developer at the Sydney Showgrounds called A.J. Hunting. A.J. Hunting! He was a very rich guy, and he went ahead and saw how great the Sprouts Elder was and how popular he was. And he said to Sprouts, hey you, come over here. And he went ahead and put Sprouts Elder under contract so he could ride for A.J. Hunting. In 1931, A.J. Hunting sent Sprouts Elder and all the Australian and British League riders, they all went over to Buenos Aires, Argentina to race in the first World Championship. And they had that event. And guess who won that? Sprouts Elder. Sprouts Elder was the first world championship ever in the Speedway. That was the first one in 1931. Sprouts Elder must have been really happy after he had won that world championship. He came back home. He came back to England at the time. And then the FIM said, no, 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 not so quick. We didn't sanction that event. So, Sprouts, you are not the world champion. And they stripped that world championship away from Sprouts Elder. He would have won the first United States championship and the first world championship. But that was not the case. However, Sprouts' fame was huge. He would go to the races, and just to go to a meet, a show-up money, he would get 100 pounds. Back in those days, 100 pounds was a lot of money. It was like $1,000 or more dollars. And so he went ahead and he was making 350 pounds a meeting on the average. And Sprouts Elder was just cleaning up. He won so much in England also. He won in Australia, came over to England, he won everything in England. This is some of the things he won. He won the Golden Gauntlet, the Golden Helmet, the West Ham Championship, Silver World Champion, Silver Sash at Wimbledon, Silver Belt Championship, Golden Helmet at Leicester, and Scottish Gold and Scottish Silver Helmet. In 1929, Sprouts went ahead and raced on the West Ham Speedway team, and he was on the administration for the West Ham. He was a rider. He was just a gifted talent. He didn't really like the team racing so much, but the team racing liked Sprouts Elder. And then in 1930, Sprouts went ahead and raced for the Southampton Saints. He was a Saint. When the Saints go marching in, there was Sprouts Elder. And he was a team captain of the Saints, so he was really an unbelievable rider. Like I mentioned, Sprouts wasn't really into the team racing so much, but the team really liked Sprouts Elder. Woo! Woo! After that 1930 league season with the Southampton Saints, Sprouts Elder called it quits. He just wanted to go back home and promote Speedway. He took his 50,000 pounds. How much was that worth? That was worth a lot of money back in those days. 50,000 pounds. And he took that money and he left England and never came back again. Sprouts Elder, truly an American superstar, American champion. This guy was good. He left England and he left Australia and came back home. This is part one. He has so much to him that we have to make two parts to this guy. He was good. Sprouts Elder just has this unbelievable name. He was exciting. He knew how to race. He knew how to thrill the fans. He was just an unbelievable rider. I wish we could see him today, or we had lots of video on this guy, because from what I know and what I hear, Sprouts Elder was truly unreal. So who was one of the greatest, possibly the greatest American speedway rider ever to race? Sprouts Elder.
Thank you.